So we are into the second unit of Python programming, which focuses on language semantics. As part of this video series, we will be discussing about variables, tokens, and keywords. So we will also try to understand how to perform various input and output operations in Python programming and the importance of indentation in Python. Along with that, we will also try to understand what are different data types supported by Python and their properties. So let's try to understand about variables. What is a variable? A variable is any name that is used to refer to the memory location, and the memory location is in turn holding a data item or the value. So that means we are using some name to refer to the memory location, and the memory location is holding some value. That is what the variable is. And in case of the Python programming language, there are certain properties related to the variables. Let's try to understand that. The explicit declaration of the variables is not required prior to their usage. That means, before you use any variable, you need not to declare its declaration. So that is, in C programming language, it is very much important to declare the variable before its usage. Otherwise, it is not valid to use that. But that constraint has been relaxed in Python programming language. And when the variable is created, you are not declaring it. But on demand, wherever you need to use the variable, so right at that moment, you can directly use the variable without any declaration. Then, variable will be created whenever we are assigning some value to that. So that is where the variable will be created. So that means using the assignment operation, you can create the variables. And also you need not to mention any type for the variable. So a variable in Python need not to be assigned with any type. But so it doesn't mean that variables doesn't have any type. But based on the value we are assigning to the variable, its type will be decided. So this is about the variables properties. So let's try to consider some examples and understand what variables are. So a equal to 50. Here we are trying to assign the value 50, the integer 50, to the variable a. So this is where the variable a is created, and the variable is referring to the memory location which stores the value 50, because the value you are storing into the variable is integer type. So now the variable is considered to be the integer type of the variable. So that is how you need not to declare the variable prior to its usage, and depending on the value you are assigning to the variable, so its type will be decided. So that is the property of the Python variable. Now consider another variable. So here I am assigning a string ram to the variable name. So now name is assigned with a string. So hereafter name will be treated as the string data type. And consider another example, CGPA equal to 8.9. Here 8.9, which is a float type of value, we are assigning to the variable CGPA. So this is how we can create different types of variables. Now a is treated as a integer type, name is treated as a string type, and CGPA is of float type. And now consider this graphical representation, how it is. So now here you can see, so there is a memory location which holds the value 50, and we are trying to refer to that value. So how can I access this value that is stored in this memory location? You are giving a name to this memory location. So that is what the variable creation is. So when we say a equal to 50, when the statement is executed, then internally what happens is, so 50 will be assigned to some memory location internally, and then a name a is given to that memory location. So that is what the variable creation means. And one more important property you need to understand is Python is a pure object-oriented programming language. So any variable is also treated as an object only in Python. Let's consider the naming convention in variables. So there are some guidelines that need to be followed when we are creating the variables. Variables are case sensitive. That means small case and uppercase is not the same. They are treated as differently. So consider these two examples. The name is one variable and the name is the other variable. So the spelling is the same. So they look like the same, but they are treated as different variables, because so here name n is a single letter, case is different. So even then they are treated as different variables only. That is, variable names are case sensitive. Not only variables, Python itself is a case sensitive language. There is a differentiation between lowercase and the uppercase. So then other guidelines need to be followed are, so any variable must start with a letter, either it is a small letter or a capital letter, or it can even start with an underscore, and it can be followed by any number of letters or digits or even underscores. And so it should not start with a digit alone. And we cannot use any of the Python keywords, that is a reserved word, as the variable name. So these are the guidelines that need to be followed while creation of the variables. So consider another property related to the variables. So in case of Python or any programming language, variable indicates that so you are referring to some memory location which stores the value. So now that value can be changed when the value of the variable is changed. So that is how the name came from the varying, because the value can be changed, that is stored in the variable. So the name we call it as a variable. And in case of Python also, it is valid to change the value of the variable. So not only the value of the variable, it is possible to change the type of the variable also during the execution of the program. So that is the speciality of the Python programming variables. So now consider how the value can be changed. So initially I have created a equal to 50. That means variable a is created. So it is of integer type because we have assigned the value 50 to it. And later, so after few statements, I am executing the other statement, a equal to 100. That means the value of a will be replaced by 100. The earlier value 50 is overwritten by this 100. So now hereafter, so a is storing the value of 100. So this is how we can change the value of the variable by using the assignment operator. So now consider, is it valid to change the type of a variable during the execution of the program? So in the same program itself, of course it is valid in Python. In other programming languages it is not valid, but here it is valid. So consider the statement a equal to 50. So now a is created so as the integer type because we are storing the integer value. But so after few statements, so I am trying to assign the string ram to a. This is also valid. So hereafter a will be treated as the string type. So earlier it was integer, but now it is string type. But we need to remember that so at any point in time, at a single point, so any variable can be assigned with only one type, not both the types. So till this statement is executed, a is of integer type. And later when this statement is executed, hereafter this variable is considered as a string. So these are the different properties related to the variables in Python. So now let's consider the topic of tokens. So what are tokens? Tokens are nothing but the smallest units in any programming language. So that is what the tokens are. So then you can consider the tokens as building blocks of any programming language. So similar to the other programming languages, so Python also supports some tokens. So you can see keywords, identifiers, literals, operators, comments, white spaces. These are all considered as the tokens of Python. So now let's try to understand what the identifiers are. So identifiers are basically the user-defined names. That is, the user is providing some names. That is how they are considered to be the user-defined names. And so for what we are using these user-defined names to refer to any variable name or the function name or the class name or even to the module name or the object names. So while we are creating the variables, we'll be assigning some names to the variables or the functions or classes or modules or objects. So such kind of names that are designed by the programmer, so such names are referred to as the identifiers in any programming language. And of course, while creating these names, that is identifiers, so we need to follow some rules. So they can start with any so it can contain any digit or the uppercase or the lowercase letter, including the underscore. Similar to the variables, the same rules can be followed here. But they should always start with a non-numeric character. Maybe it can start with the underscore also, but it should never start with the digit. And also, it should not contain digits alone. When we create the variable 1, 2, 3, then it cannot be treated as an identifier. It is invalid because it doesn't have any underscore or the alphabetic character. And of course, the identifiers are case sensitive, similar to the variables. Of course, variable is a type of identifier only. So that means all the properties that we have discussed earlier, they are applicable here also. So though Python supports any size, that is any length for the identifier, but PEP8, so it advises to limit the number of characters of Python identifiers to 79 characters. And it should not carry the same name that we are using for the keywords. That is, any identifier cannot be having the same name as the keyword. It should not use. So the keywords cannot be used as the identifiers. And along with that, so one guideline we need to understand is leading and trailing underscores have some special meaning in case of Python, though it is valid to use the underscore so at the beginning or at the end of the variable or the identifier, but they have some special meaning. So that is how better avoid that. So for creating the plain identifier variables or the functions, but as part of the classes, so we can use them. So when we discuss the classes and objects concept in unit 14 and 15, that time we will discuss how to use them. So now let's consider examples of few of the valid identifiers and invalid identifiers. So consider the variable student marks. So it is valid. It contains all the alphabetic characters and there is an underscore in between. So it is valid. Underscore emp underscore sal. So here it starts with underscore and there are underscores and alphabetic characters. So it is valid. So employee. So usually this kind of names we use to refer to the class names. So E is a capital letter. So it is valid to use capital or the small case. Combination of capital and small case letter is also valid. So name all small case is valid. So fact underscore fun. Usually this kind of notation we use for designing the function names. So it is a function to find the factorial of a number. So there are two words and the words are connected using underscore. So these are all the valid identifiers examples. Now let's see which are the invalid identifiers. Some examples we have here. 1, 2, 3 ABC. So it started with a digit, so it is invalid. And here student marks. There are two words, but they are connected with hyphen, which is invalid. So except underscore, none of the special symbols are valid. So it is invalid. And if is a keyword, and that is how it is also not valid. And then student at marks. Here what is at? At is a special symbol, so it is also not valid. And emp space salary. So these two words are connected with the space. There is in between a space. So you cannot have spaces or any other symbols as part of the variable names. So this is about the identifiers in Python. These are few of the valid identifiers. These are the examples for the invalid identifiers. Now let's see what the keywords are. So in any programming language, there are certain words that are reserved by the programming language itself because they are predefined with some meaning. That is how they are known as the keywords or the reserved words. They have certain meaning. That is how they are known as the keywords or the reserved words. So of course, you cannot use. Already we have seen that these keywords cannot be used as variable names or the function names or any other identifiers. The same rule is to be followed here also. So now you can see these are the list of keywords that are part of the Python programming language. And of course, the number of keywords supported by the programming language Python is dependent on the version. So these are the set of keywords supported by certain version of the Python. So if you go for some other version, so you can see some other list of keywords. So maybe there are variations with one or two number of keywords. Other than that, most of them will be common. So that's about the keywords. So let's see briefly. So we'll be discussing about each of these keywords in detail later. For the time being, we'll try to understand very briefly about what these keywords are. So try to get at least the names of the keywords. Maybe the details we'll see later. So and, so we can use it to connect the expressions. That is what the and keyword is. Then as, to create the alias name, we'll be using as. So assert we'll be using for the debugging or to check a particular value is valid for a variable or not. So break is to break the loop. Class, to create it, to define a class, we can use the class keyword. Continue is to skip a particular iteration of a loop, we can use continue keyword. So def is used to create a function definition. Then del is the keyword to delete any of the object. Elif, else, they are used as part of the unconditional statement usage. Except is the keyword which is used for the exception handling. Along with that, finally is also for the exception handling. Then false represents a Boolean value. For is for the looping condition. Then from is a keyword that is part of the modules. When you are importing modules, this from keyword is useful. Global is used to create the global variables. And if is to create a conditional statement. So import is also part of the modules. When we are importing the modules, we use this import keyword. Then in is, these are the special operators that are introduced in Python programming language. Then lambda, to create any anonymous function, we can use this lambda keyword. And along with that, there are few other keywords also. The none. So none is the keyword who represents nothing. This is a special keyword that is supported by Python to indicate nothing. Then non-local is a keyword to declare a non-local variable. Not is the logical operator, or is another logical operator. Pass, raise, return, to return the value from the function. True is a Boolean value. Try is also for the exception handling mechanism. While is to create a loop. Then with, yield. These are few of the keywords we have seen very briefly. In the future classes, we'll try to understand each of these keywords in detail. So we have seen keywords. So keywords are the reserved words that have some predefined meaning in the programming language. And these are the list of keywords supported by Python. So now let's try to understand comments. So how you can introduce comments into your programming. So while writing any program, it is very much important to introduce comments to indicate the meaning of the statements we are writing in the program. So for the documentation purpose, it is very much important to include comments in the programming language. So Python supports a single line comment, and there is no multi-line commenting that is directly supported by Python, but we have a way to do that also. So single line comment is the hash symbol. Whatever the statement that starts with this hash symbol, so that is considered as the comment. So comment means it will not be considered by the interpreter. So while compilation or the interpretation execution, it will be ignored by the interpreter of the Python. So such statements are treated as comments. They are only for the understanding purpose. So here you can see I have given a code snippet that includes a comment. Here the statement start with hash. That means this statement will be ignored by the interpreter. And there are few other statements. And here you can see there are 2 lines of comments. So I have indicated the code statements in red color. That indicates that they are comments. Here is a single line comment. That is how it started with hash. And here you can see that's a multi-line comment. To support multi-line comments, we can use triple quotes. So it has to be enclosed within triple quotes. So whatever the strings that are included within triple quotes, such statements are treated as commenting in case of the Python programming language. Now let's see what Python indentation is. So Python provides a great feature which mandates indentation. So it is mandatory to have indentation in case of the Python programming language. What indentation is and how it is mandatory and how we can use it as part of our program, we'll see now. So what is indentation? So in case of C, C++ or Java, in such kind of programming languages, so to indicate a block of code, we'll be enclosing the multiple statements or even single statement also. To indicate that it is a block, we group them together by enclosing them within curly braces. This kind of flower braces or the curly braces we call them. But Python do not support such kind of grouping of the statements. So whenever Python would like to introduce a block, so we have to follow the indentation. So indentation means white spaces. The statements which are starting with the same line or with same indentation, so they are included in a particular block. So that is how block can be created in Python programming language. Of course, indentation plays a critical role, and why it is made as mandatory in Python programming is that they enhance the readability of the code. So in case of the other programming languages, so it is not mandatory. So indentation will not be followed, so that the readability of the code is very poor. But whereas in case of Python, it is mandatory to follow this indentation, and violation of the indentation will generate the syntax error. So that is what we need to understand about indentation. So now consider an example. So here I have provided a code snippet which indicates the indentation. So here you can see there is a print statement. So it started here. Then the second statement, which is in the same block itself. That is how they started in the same column itself. So then this is all part of the block 1. Let's assume that. So now as part of this for loop, I have written few statements. So that means I have to provide whenever a new block started. So here this indicates a new block started. So whenever there is a new block started, then few white spaces need to be given before writing that statement. So that is what the indentation is. And usually the standard procedure to follow is 4 spaces are required when you are providing indentation. It's not mandatory that you have to give 4 spaces. You can either give 1 space or 2 space or 10 spaces also. But so the statements that are within the same block, they need to have the same number of spaces before starting that statement. So that is what the indentation is. Here you can see, so this statement, after this statement started with few spaces. So here you can see within the for loop there is an if condition, and all these statements are within the block. And within this block there is again another inner block. So inside this if, we are writing another print statement. This is another block. So then the indentation should be given here. So this is how you can use indentation in Python programming language. So I am showing you another example, so which is a large snippet of code which includes various various kinds of statements like sequential statements, repeated statements, conditional statements. So you can see. So now till here, all the statements are belonging to the same block. So now and then we can use the white spaces, the lines with the white spaces to indicate the code, to improve the readability of the code. So now in this for loop, there is a particular statement. So because this is starting with the new block, then we need to give the indentation. So if we fail to give this indentation wherever it is required, then Python will generate an error. That is how it is mandatory to give the indentation. Now this for loop contains this statement alone. Then after this statement, the big count equal to none statement, so need not to start with any indentation. So that is how these statements should follow in the same column itself. That is how again after for, so there is a block, and big count after this there are